gonna make you feel sick to your stomach, and I'm sorry in advance, but it has to be said. Nestle, one of the largest food companies in the world, is implicated in the deaths of over 11 million babies in low-income countries. Let me say that again, over 11 million babies. This wasn't a tragic accident. It was a calculated, profit-driven strategy that exploited vulnerable families for financial gain. In the 1970s and 80s, Nestle aggressively marketed its infant formula in low-income countries. At a glance, that doesn't seem so bad, I guess, but the tactics they used were horrifying. Nestle hired salesmen, dressed them up as doctors and milk nurses, and sent them into hospitals and clinics to promote their formula. These milk nurses told mothers that their formula was healthier and safer than their actual breast milk, and they gave away samples for free in the beginning. Why? Because they knew exactly what would happen. When moms started using formula and breastfeeding their babies less, their breast milk supply dried up. Because breast milk works on a supply-demand basis. If the baby isn't breastfeeding, the milk dries up. By the time moms run out of free breast milk samples, they have to get more because the milk's gone. They can't go back to breastfeeding. They're stuck. And of course, formula isn't free, so they had to start paying for it. Now imagine you're a mother in a lower middle income country who was once able to feed the baby for free, but now has to pay for it. And on top of that, clean water is hard to come by. You're forced to mix your powdered formula with whatever water you have access to, water that could be, and often was, contaminated. He started getting sick. They developed diarrhea, malnutrition, vomiting, and they died. Millions of babies died. By the peak of the crisis in the early 1980s, Nestle's marketing practices were responsible for the excess of 212,000 deaths every single year, a 27% jump in infant mortality. And to make it even sadder, in these same communities, breastfeeding would have saved lives. Breast milk is naturally sterile and full of antibodies. It doesn't need to have water mixed into it, and in many cases, it's tailored to meet the baby's needs. But Nestle's aggressive marketing made mothers feel like their formula was better. They manipulated families into thinking they weren't good enough on their own, their babies would be healthier with a product that put them at risk. It wasn't just unethical, it was deadly. In response to this tragedy, activists and organizations launched the Nestle boycott in 1977, and it became one of the largest consumer boycotts in history. The boycott aimed to hold Nestle accountable and also push restrictive regulations on the marketing of formula. In 1981, the World Health Organization introduced the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, which sets guidelines to prevent harmful marketing practices. And here's even more shocking, Nestle continues to violate these guidelines even to this day. Reports from advocacy groups still show that Nestle is still using aggressive marketing tactics, particularly in low and middle income countries, where families are most vulnerable. In countries with poor access to clean water, formula feeding is still a risk. And even in wealthier countries, where the message of formula is just as good as breast milk leads to public health issues. For example, when there's a shortage of breast milk, which we saw. I'm not saying that formula feeding your baby is wrong, that's not what I'm saying at all. Do whatever works best for you in your situation. What I'm talking about, corporations exploit vulnerable people for financial gain. They intentionally use symbols of trust, mother-baby bond, doctors, nurses. So you're thinking that you're doing the best